Thank you, Madam Chair, and my pleasure, my colleague. I first want to applaud you, Madam Chair. When I came to the legislature 4 years ago, my first committee hearing was sitting with you in Budget Sub 3, and I've learned so much from you, and your institutional memory and experience makes you the star for the Budget Committee chairmanship, and I'm just delighted that you're still here, and I see you as a constant resource as I've been here in the legislature. And sir, I have to agree with Senator Roth that in the 5 years that I've now entered the 5th budget I've heard, you have given certainly the most articulate summary of a document, and I'm so impressed with a governor that's been in office for such a short period of time to encapsulate his vision for what he wants to see done in the state of California, not only today but into the future, was very impressive. The presentation was as complex as my ability to recite your name, so you'll forgive me if I can't do that. So I will be referring you respectfully as sir. But if I may, one of the areas that's always been a concern of mine, and I know a concern of many on this in this legislature, that you didn't allude to too much in your budget, and I want to make sure that their voices are heard, and that's the developmentally disabled. We know that our payment to providers to help with us in regional centers has been deficient, and as a result, in many of our regional centers, many of these providers have fallen off. And I know we have a study that's going to come back in March, and I'm going to predict that that study is going to show that we have been underpaying these providers, and we need to step it up if we're going to give the kind of services that we need. And I'm 100% in support of all the earlyhood child education programs. I applaud the governor certainly for that. But we need to see something in the budget that is going to show the developmentally disabled community that their services that they expect and deserve are going to be made available to them. Also, one area that I'm sure many of us hear about is that, and by the way, I want to thank you for the investment in Alzheimer's research. That's wonderful. That takes care of our growing elderly population, of which I'm a member of now in their twilight years. But on the other side of the coin, we need to see a similar kind of investment in the research of autism, which is affecting almost 1 in 40 kids in the state of California. It's truly in epidemic proportions. And I hope that as we work further on this template of a budget, there's always a degree of contention. When you have a child that is autistic and they go into the public school system, some are well prepared for those autistic children to come in and give them the care and educational means that they need that are different from your regular population. But the state needs to give more guidance and more funds to enable the school districts to just basically not close the door on these kids, because investing in these kids can really mean a lot to their ability to thrive on their own in the future. That's what the research certainly shows. So I'd like to get your comments on funding the DDS community pending the March study as my first question.
Yes, so I'll make a couple of brief comments and then turn it over to my colleague as well. The first is on developmental disabilities. It's definitely a priority for the new governor. It's something he's spoken a lot about. And, I could say on my own, in a previous role, I worked with Tony Coelho, who's the author of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and, he explained the history of the Lanterman Act here in California and all the things that California has done to be a pioneer in this space, and that's certainly something that we want to remain and continue doing. On the rate study, as you mentioned, that's coming out this spring, and that's certainly something we will be paying very close attention to, and we have to make sure that we build any changes into our budget. And before I turn it over, I just want to make 1 or 2 other quick points on the Alzheimer's. That's a $3 million ongoing fund, so it's not just this year, but for all the years to come. And it's on the research side because there's still so much that we're learning about the brain, but it's also for this task force that we're hoping the governor and Maria Shriver and other members of different communities can come together on how across different communities we can build resiliency and make sure that more people are prepared, that they can take steps to take care of loved ones. So that's an important priority. And then the last thing is special education funding. You know, we built in $576 million in this budget, but we know it's still not enough. We know there's a rise in the number of cases of autism in our schools. And we also know, as you pointed out, that there's providing services, but there's also the research side. And at the time, you know, we don't know whether at the federal level there's going to be further support. We have to look into ways to support across that whole area as well. And so specifically on the rate study and any increases in funding for DDS, I'll turn it over to my colleague.
Hi, good afternoon. Teresa Calvert with Department of Finance. And as was noted multiple times, we expect a lot of discussion when that rate study is released in March of this year in both houses. And also want to note that there were additional proposals in the DD side. So besides the Best Buddies augmentation that was mentioned earlier, there are resources for increased caseload ratios for specialized behavioral and medical needs. So at the regional center system, caseworkers having a lower caseload to help with those individuals. There are also increased resources for community crisis homes and looking to expand that to children in the DD system, as well as additional monitoring of specialized homes. So those are already some investments that are included in this governor's budget. And then again, we expect a more lengthy conversation when the rate study is released.
If I can just kind of piggyback on that, you know, the last patient in Sonoma has left now, and there was promises made that that property was going to be utilized for the benefit of the DD community. Has there been any discussion with the governor about how to utilize that property in the future?
Right, so the last consumer was placed in December 2018, and those discussions, and right, there's still Fairview and the general treatment area of Porterville upcoming in the future years. And the conversations around the property continue. So I know that there are active conversations with the community members as well as the county.
Okay, great. I want to go to the next topic is pharmaceuticals. And I think it's a very bold idea for the governor to amass our purchases and to try to get the best discounts on behalf of the state. I want to just say that I share with my colleague, Senator Roth, that the 340B program is a very important program that its decimation can cause actually hospitals to close, especially smaller hospitals that are both in Senator Roth's district and my district in Riverside County. So we stand united in hoping to preserve that program. But, you know, saying I also don't want you to recreate the wheel, because there is a mechanism out there already that can get the attention, certainly of the drug companies, and maybe the state of California should form its own PBM, because they're the ones that are extracting a lot of the discounts from the drug companies, and unfortunately they're not always for the benefit of the insurance companies. It's for these multi-billion-dollar companies that take the money and provide good returns for their shareholders. You know, one company alone has a market value of $47 billion. I'll guarantee you they're not getting 15 cents a claim for every prescription that is transmitted through that hub, if you will. So this PBM acts as a hub. Every prescription goes through that hub to all the different insurance companies that didn't have to pay the price. So you may look at the model of a PBM for the state of California as a way to expedite the positioning of the state of California to get into the business of providing the cost of medications at a lower price for our constituents. I'm in very strong support of clean water for everyone in the state of California. And I understand that there is an ongoing cost to that, but when you look at the budget surplus that we have, the cost of providing the bottled water, which I think is very important, and ultimately finding the etiology of what's causing the problems in these specified areas of the state, and then coming up with a capital improvement plan to fix them, whether it's adjoining them to different water districts and incentivizing the water districts to provide that clean water. My point here is that it is important, but I think that, you know, in a state where we have this budget surplus, the minimal cost in comparison to our state budget to fix this problem is de minimis. And I can tell you that many of our citizens, especially in my district, they are just tax fatigued. And when they heard about a water tax, they flip out and say, really, another tax that we have to contend with. We have been charging taxes in the state of California that were, in recent years, that were promised to be temporary, that became permanent. So we have a good, strong tax revenue. It would be great for this governor to somehow take a leadership role and say, you know, our citizens are taxed enough. We are going to provide the water and guarantee that everyone in California gets clean water, and we're going to ensure it through money that is dedicated through the general fund. I hope that the governor will do that. And then lastly, I want to applaud the governor once again, because many of us, I mean, he was a question mark for many of us. We didn't know if he was going to be the fiscal hawk, if you will, that Governor Brown showed himself to be, and I have to applaud him as he is now departed for the robust funds that we have in our reserves in the event of an emergency. So I want to say how much I support the money that's given to STRS when 23% of potentially their revenue is going to be to pensions. We want that money going to the classroom, and certainly going to PERS. The $3 billion, I think, is also very important. But, you know, this addresses the symptoms. It doesn't address the problem. So what we're doing is we're taking gauze and we're putting it on a wound for a patient that's got anticoagulant therapy and has no way to clot, right? Certainly, Senator Pan understands what I'm saying. We need to provide a pill that's going to cause some clotting. And the way that we make that pill to cause the clotting is we have to figure out a pension system in the state of California that works for the workers, but doesn't become an ongoing liability for the citizens of the state of California and the state of California. And it needs to be a bipartisan solution. So I hope that the governor sees this as stopping an acute problem, but there are some chronic issues that are going to continue to linger on if we don't address some type of pension reforms that are true in the state of California, so that every year we don't have to worry about the stock market having like the December that it had and wondering, like I heard somebody say that PERS lost $10 billion in one day in December. I mean, that's a lot of money. We need to have a more stable mechanism of ensuring that our retirees get what's promised to them, but in a way in which we can afford it in the state of California. I hope the governor will be open to that.